Today we're going to talk, thanks, John. We're going to prepare for the SPDIG National Meeting in October, the virtual meeting. We are going to talk about the dissemination workbook and get you, hopefully just kind of check in where people are and get you prepared for next steps with that. I will preview Fidelity Friday, which is happening tomorrow and is going to be a chance for you all to work with each other and figure things out in the current context. And then we have our final presentation today in the coaching series. The Maryland SPDIG will talk about their transformational coaching system that they've developed and is working for them. So the SPDIG National Meeting, just a reminder, please invite your Parent Training and Information Center, Community Parent Resource Center, CPRC as appropriate, not every state has one, the universities you work with, the district partners you work with. It's virtual, so they don't have to pay anything, there's no tax, it's easy to be with, to incorporate them. We'll do registration soon, and then we'll have a sense of the roles that are going to be there, and we can plan accordingly. Dissemination workbook. So the plan was to have folks doing workbook step 3 by September 1st. So drafting workbook step 3. And just a reminder, workbook step 3 is about sharing impact. It's called sharing your value proposition, but we called it sharing impact and something about value proposition. But it's drafting, it doesn't mean it has to be perfect, but the idea was to have it drafted. And then workbook step 4, we'll look at it in a second, was supposed to be drafted by September 30th, and that's about creating your messaging. And workbook step 5, having timing, a calendar of when different things will be done, would be right before the conference, and then you're finalizing your plan at the conference. But we need to check in with everyone, see where they're at to make sure that this plan still works. So why don't we go ahead and do that right now? You should see a poll on your screen, and you get to choose the one, like the step that you're at right now. Even if it's not finalized, you have worked with a team of people that is representative of, your PTI or CPRC, whoever you're partnering with for family engagement. At least one university you're working with, district, any other partners, you all are working together for your dissemination goals, your stakeholder analysis, which is figuring out partners for dissemination and who you want to reach, brand value proposition, which is the sharing your impact, thinking about that, how you're going to do that, content development, which is your messaging, and we'll stop with step 4 since most people wouldn't be to step 5 calendaring yet, or the choice of we have not started yet.
Jennifer, we've got a few more responses trickling in. I'll go ahead and let people know that this can remain anonymous, so please answer as honestly as possible, whether it's we haven't started yet or we're just jumping into step 1. This is information for us to prepare as we go forward, as well as information for you all to just be thinking about, okay, where are we and how do we get to where we need to be? And it looks like we've got 70% of people have responded, and I haven't seen any other responses come in. So I'm going to end the poll and share the results.
Okay. So 22% of the folks who responded have drafted dissemination goals. 30% have gotten to the stakeholder analysis, and 26% have gotten to the brand value proposition step. 22% have not started yet. And so looking at those numbers, I think we can keep, and John, you can weigh in, anyone can weigh in, either on the chat or by vocalizing with your microphone. But I think we could keep this as an aspirational plan that if you're in step and then you're doing these things, but definitely I think getting through step 3 is going to be really important for the conference. So step 3 being about the messaging that you want to develop. It'll just help your thinking and it'll help you be able to share with others and ask others questions. It doesn't mean you can't get things out of the conference if that's not happening, but I do think it's really important that this be done involving all the people that are part of your project, not just for the dissemination plan that you're creating, but also just as a way of working. Because when Congress first created the state personnel development grant, before that, the state improvement grant, when they first created it, the reason that they required those partnerships with the PTI or CPRC, with at least one of yours, was one district, because they saw this as a state effort that brought in these really important partners to work together, to understand together. So it was never just meant to be a state going out on their own and then telling different groups what to do. Great. It was meant to be a joint effort. And hopefully, myself and your project officer, if it's not me, have led you in that direction. And if not, we want to start doing it now. Your family partners shouldn't be an add-on. It should be a from the very beginning, how are we going to work together? I know that there are instances where the family partners are going through a leadership transition, things happening. So there's not 100% that can always be perfect. And the same is with SCAs, right? There are times when the PTA or CPRC is strong and the SCA is going through changes in personnel. So you can have it either way. There are times, I haven't even mentioned it, the evaluators are know what they're doing, are strong, and everyone else is changing around them. So, yeah, it goes without saying the evaluators are included in that too. I didn't write it because I think it's just always been something that SPDIGs are really good about doing. So, any other questions or thoughts about the steps and what we're headed toward for the conference? And I've got more, so you may still have questions after this. So let's look at the dissemination workbook. I'm going to try to make it exciting, like the latest Marvel movie or anything good someone has seen lately, because I haven't seen a Marvel movie. If someone has seen a good movie lately, feel free to put it into the chat because I am hoping to go to the theater soon. All right, so I'm going to show the dissemination workbook. And why is that? Oh, sorry, it's a little large at the moment. But maybe that'll help you see. Okay. John, could you put a link to the dissemination workbook in the chat as well?
Sure.
Thanks. So you all can look at it on your own, or you can look at it on my screen. So
And
just to
Jennifer, actually, the link that I'm going to put in is the link to the document that's the to the OSEP meeting and beyond. And within that, people will find the link to the workbook as well as the link to the survey. But it also kind of lays out the roadmap to the national meeting.
Yeah, and I did mean to share that too. So why don't we let me start there. Thanks everyone for hanging with me for a second while I get these ducks in a row. Okay, so we had shared this PDF previously, but if you didn't receive it in your email or weren't part of one of the webinars or meetings when we were presenting it, that is okay. You can start now, always. Again, from where we are. So dissemination action, this was a roadmap for the OSEP conference and the SPDIG national meeting. So some has passed, but it was preparing you for both. And the purpose and the long-term outcomes for this work is we want to strengthen dissemination, expand connections to supportive partners, and better demonstrate the impact of your work. One of the ideas behind this is that whatever changes come our way, or whatever remains the same is another way of looking at it, we want you as a project, as a SPDIG, as the evaluator of a SPDIG, we want you to have things in place so that you can ensure that you have financial support, that you're able to recruit people, etc., without the grant, if that's what happens. If you do have the grant and everything continues, these are still good practices, right? So it's you win either way. If it doesn't look like it's going to occur per the House bill that came out, but you never know. If you were ended up having block grants in states where the state needed to determine what they were going to support, then you'd want them to know what your impact is, how you've helped your partners, what your brand value proposition is, right? So that they would want to support you. If you continue as a SPDIG, you still need to recruit partners. You still want your legislature to support you so that you can scale. You still want more districts to come on, etc. So whatever our future holds, whichever path we go on, these are really important practices for you to be able to continue your work. And as you come up with new work, it is generalizable to anything that you do. So that's the big idea. So as a result of the work, you'll have a dissemination plan, which will be great. Use that dissemination plan for other work. You can make changes as you go along. It's just a good start. We worked previously on a scavenger hunt to think about the three main aspects of dissemination of, I won't go into it right now, but we'd shared the scavenger hunt prior to the conference. And then, so for the dissemination workbook, we talked about including a variety of voices, what I just talked about again, using the timeline. And then we had prior to the OSEP conference and during the conference, knowing that not everyone could attend, we had ideas of what to do if you weren't there. And then we have this workbook step 3. I just went over this timeline. Workbook step 4, draft by September 30th, and step 5, draft by October 14th. And then talking about the draft at the national meeting. Again, if you are not there, that is okay. This is aspirational at this point for some folks, but you can continue to work on it. So any questions about the plan and the dates so far?
I didn't have a question. I put it in the chat too. I had a
Okay.
question just about the PDF. On page 5 of the document, it's one of our goal charts. There's 2 of the boxes you can't type in. I even had somebody with Adobe Access try to edit it for me. Is there any other copies that are fillable, fully fillable?
So I did not realize, I don't think I had experienced that problem when I tried it. So I'll try again. And we are creating an accessible version anyway. So I think we just need to get into this, make an accessible version, send that out. So I think it's yet another push in that direction.
We'll try the export. Thank you.
Yeah. And that's the way to get toward accessibility. Okay, thanks, Selena. That is good to know. I like the feedback. Yeah, and I did check with the EIR, Effective Innovations and Research Program, which had originally had their TA Center create this for them, and they don't have an accessible or other version. So it's just really up to us at this point. But thank you, Michelle. All right, did I miss anything else? Oh, I'm glad that people had movie ideas too. I definitely want to see Naked Gun too. Okay. Just catching up, sorry. Okay, great. K-pop Demon Hunters. I've heard a lot about that. My son says he has not seen it. All right. All right. So dissemination workbook. Does anyone want me to walk through the workbook itself? Would that be helpful to talk through the big ideas of it and what we're trying to accomplish? You can raise your hand, you can put it in the chat, you can give me a thumbs up, or just nothing, and then I'll just move on. All right. Okay, I don't see any thumbs, so I'm going to say that we are good to go. So thanks everyone for working on it. Thanks for bringing in your partners. But Courtney, do you want me to walk through it, or are you saying you're okay? Sorry.
I'm saying I'm okay.
Okay, good, good. It could be either. That would be the issue with the thumbs up. All right. Thanks, everyone. I'll go ahead and share my screen again. So hopefully, I'll be interested in hearing from you all as you go through this process, what works for you, what you would change going forward. So just a few reminders of what I just said. Consider everyone who works with your project. Who else can you invite to attend? Who else can you invite to work with you on doing the dissemination workbook and also the SPDIG national meeting? How can you work with them prior to the conference? And how can you meet with them during and after the conference? The example here I have is Oklahoma, because last year they had a conference room for both days of the conference where everyone was, and then they had rooms that they could go into individually for breakouts, or it wouldn't have been last year, it would have been when we had it virtually. So just thinking through how you can somehow collaborate in a really meaningful way around this conference. You're going to receive these slides from John after, at least the event page where they'll be located. And I have another workbook also from the same EdScale group who provided TA for the EIR program. And the workbook is how to implement just about anything. So we are going to have strands at the SPDIG national meeting. You'll be receiving a draft agenda soon, but the strands will be one, of course, the dissemination, right? That's the big strand. But another one is going to be responding to the need. We heard from some of you that you still need to get into how to implement your project well. And so there are two aspects of that. It's the implementation supports, right? And then there's also like project management and the more, mechanics of having a SPDIG. And so the implement just about anything is more about that implementation supports, implementation science. And then we're also going to have some like project management and on the ground, boots on the ground kind of, these are the things we need to do to be successful. The Power of Partnerships blog from CSEP gives you some great tools related to developing partnerships, which is part of our overall goals for not just this dissemination workbook, but just generally developing those partnerships. Again, if whatever our future holds, whether we continue our work as it is or things change a bit with block grants, etc., developing partnerships is going to be critical. And then if you have things that you want to know more about or feel like you need to know, please email John and he and I will respond to that. So email us if you think of questions later. Tomorrow we have Fidelity Friday, and this is going to be a problem solving session. So no presenters this time. It's going to be around the idea of uncertainty. And, I've called it the word of the year. The Fidelity Friday will be a chance to tap into the wisdom of the group and lean into problem solving together. We are going to use this liberating structure, critical uncertainties, to work in small groups and to find answers that you seek. So it's a really nice structure for working together. So you don't have to figure this out on your own, but any fidelity challenges that you're having, and I'm sure everyone has something that is a little bit challenging with fidelity, whether it's specific to right now or if it's ongoing, either way works. But we will be breaking people up, doing some problem solving, have a nice structure for that. But if you want to learn more about critical uncertainties, I can put that in the chat in just a second, and you will also have these slides. So that is it for my announcements and getting us prepared for this FDIG national meeting. We will have an October webinar, director's webinar also, just for the final way to all come together before this FDIG national meeting, and we can get a little more in depth in the draft agenda at that point in time. This is our final webinar in the coaching series. We've been learning from the coaching model demonstration projects. We learned from CSEP. So we've gotten into a lot of different ideas about coaching. In October, I'm going to give you a summary of some big idea lessons that have come out, or ideas and strategies that have come out of those presentations. Our final presentation, as promised, is from the Maryland SPDIG. We have Alicia Palmer and Cliff Mason. I know that Brittany Salmons from the project is also here today. They've just done such a nice job of creating a system and being really thoughtful. It's very much based on implementation science, but also their experience of how you build true relationship. And the tools and resources they've built, I think, might be of interest to you as well. And I told them I'm going to ask them some questions as they go that might help you connect and apply their work more. And they also have some great thinking questions for you. So be ready to put your thinking cap on and share your answers with the group to help build our wisdom around coaching. So with that, I will turn it over to Alicia and Cliff.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you. As Jennifer said, my name is Alicia Palmer, and I'm the project director for Maryland SPDIG. And presenting with me today is Cliff Mason, who is our SPDIG instructional specialist and works extensively with Brittany Salmons and our local coaches. I did want to take a moment to shout out to our two other members of our leadership team. I don't believe they're on the call today. Carol Quirk, who is our co-principal investigator and was the original author of our SPDIG, and then Amy Gomer Erickson, who serves as our external evaluator. Next. Thank you. Oops. I missed my notes. See, there we go. All right. For the Maryland SPDIG, our theme is Maryland Accelerates. Our focus is actually accelerating achievement for all learners. And we do that by preparing personnel to improve systems and outcomes for children with disabilities. We collaborate with national experts in the areas of mathematics, social emotional learning, and instructional coaching. Our university partner, University of Maryland, has developed 2 courses for pre-service educators and in-service educators that utilizes and highlights the structures that we have in place. And then, of course, we have a robust and active stakeholder advisory group. Our intention through all this is the reduction of mathematics achievement gaps for elementary children with disabilities and to improve social emotional competence for all learners. With a specific emphasis on personnel development, we are committed to cultivating the knowledge and skills of our teachers, local leaders, and state partners to refine instructional practice and target accelerated achievement in inclusive learning environments. Essential to this work is an understanding that success requires a concerted effort from all of us to refine our practices, enhance organizational structures, and support the implementation of evidence-based practices, as well as to engage our communities. All of these actions are with the goal of improving learner outcomes. We feel the road to change is open and ready, and we are each critical drivers in this process. Ding. You missed one, Cliff. There we go. Thank you. Our intended outcomes, as discussed, is to explore a structured coaching process. This is one of the foundational elements of our Maryland SPDIG. to take a look today at the stages of the coaching cycle and the coaching process that we have been implementing. And then along the way, discuss the implications of coaching and its impact on student achievement, which is the end goal for all of our projects. To get us started, in the chat, if you would, share your experiences with impactful coaching and consider, how is this type of coaching, or how was this experience different from mentoring or a more directed approach to coaching? If you share out in the chat, that would be great. Okay.
So I'm seeing in the chat, some people have appreciated having targeted coaching for a specific skill. Some have noted that they never had the opportunity to have coaching or be a coach within the education realm when they were in it. So they appreciate learning about coaching as it is now. The collaborative access, aspect of coaching and being action driven and strengths based. Someone noted, as an example, really interrupting institutional racism as a white leader. It's just something I never considered, but having a coach to even navigate through that. Again, I see more just having things that are more targeted. And then we see some other people noting that they had more mentorship than coaching, or what they know to be coaching, which is more formal and structured. And then Becky, I love your last comment, focusing on building capacity instead of fixing a problem. We're not trying to fix educators or necessarily solve a problem, but it's about that growth and capacity.
Thank you all for sharing. A lot of your comments are very much aspects of our actual process. So I think we might all be on target. Next. Maryland's operational framework for coaching is based on the principles shared in Elena Aguilar's work with transformational coaching, as referenced in her books, Arise and The Art of Coaching. Our model builds on the following core beliefs. Coaching is targeted professional learning grounded in research and evidence-based practice. Coaching builds on the strengths and the talents of the teachers or educators. So we're not trying to fix a problem. We're trying to grow and cultivate learning. Coaching facilitates access to rigorous evidence-based math, social emotional, and specially designed instruction for all students, especially students with disabilities. And then finally, coaching contributes to increased math achievement and equitable outcomes for all students. And this really is the operational framework for our Maryland SPDIG. To implement sustainable and meaningful systemic change, it is critical to plan with the end in mind. Identify your goal. So as we have, it's the reduction of mathematics achievement gaps for all students. And this was supported by the trend data from across the state that has demonstrated that this is a long-standing need. Maryland SPDIG targets our state identified measurable result, or SIMR, and is aligned with our Part B ESSA improvement actions addressing math achievement for elementary students with disabilities. We're looking for that interconnection, and we'll just keep it at that. Our pathway to success has led to the development of a series of practice profiles for evidence-based core mathematics instruction, which is aligned with the What Works Clearing Warehouse practice guide, and systems of intervention using data for instructional decision-making based on the National Center on Intensive Intervention. The adaptation of content, method, and delivery of mathematics specially designed instruction, and an integrated approach to social-emotional learning. Reinforcing the use of research and evidence-based practices in addition to data-based decisions is an ever-evolving process and is becoming a standard of practice across our implementing teams. Our milestones and metrics for success guide our actions. Maryland SPDIG is utilizing a quality usage, relevance, and knowledge assessment, also known QURK, which is grounded in Guskey's 5 critical levels of professional development. His professional development evaluation, and drives continuous program improvement by providing key information for decision-making and program implementation. To achieve the goals of Maryland SPDIG, it is important that participants exit professional learning with the knowledge and skills necessary to implement the evidence-based practices as outlined within the learning targets for each professional learning session. Training fidelity is also assessed using self-assessment, observation data, and the tracking of student achievement data, with the purpose of demonstrating the connection between enhanced teacher capacity and improved student learning. The final aspect of planning with the end in mind is the provision of ongoing professional learning and coaching. Acquisition professional learning includes presentation, non-evaluative practice, collaboration with peers, and access to resources developed by state and local experts. All professional learning activities intentionally involve adult learning domains, and the results are used to inform changes to content and focus of training. Ongoing skill building includes book studies, team-based collaborative planning, and most importantly, coaching. It is often said that the best intervention is the teacher in the classroom. We would add to that descriptor and say the best intervention in the classroom is a teacher working with an effective coach. And to bring this point home, let's take a look at some effective change from this year's implementation. During our most recent reporting cycle, this effective change was noted with 72.41% of students with disabilities demonstrating growth in mathematics at a rate comparable to their grade level peers, as measured by the Maryland Comprehensive Assessment Program, or MCAP, and MAP benchmark assessment data. Overall, 78.64% of all the students in our SPDIG implementation sites demonstrated math skills development as measured by their classroom formative measures. Starting with these outcomes, we want to explore further the impact of teacher proficiency on student outcomes. Let's start with our teachers. Based on teachers' demonstrated performance on their self-assessment rubric for before coaching and the coach's assessment completed after coaching, 100% of the 20 educators who participated in at least 2 coaching cycles demonstrated improved practices in their targeted evidence-based practices. Those may have included cognitive regulation, explicit instruction, fact fluency, identity and agency, manipulative-based instructional sequences, and self-regulation support for learning and behavior. On average, teachers started with a rating of learning 3 or developing 1, according to their baseline data. After coaching, their performance level improved on average to between proficient 1 and proficient 2. Our question is then, how does improved proficiency affect student performance outcomes? We want our teachers to grow, but more importantly, we want our students to grow. Cliff. There we go. An independent sample t-test showed that students taught by math teachers who demonstrated proficiency in the targeted practices grew at a statistically significant greater rate than students taught by teachers who had not yet demonstrated proficiency. If taught by a math teacher who was observed to be proficient in the selected math practice, 63% of students met their grade level mathematics growth target from fall to winter of the 24-25 school year. If taught by a teacher who had not yet met proficiency in the selected math practice, we still had 51% of the students meet their grade level mathematics growth targets. While the N size for students with disabilities was too small for a robust statistical analysis, teachers who met proficiency through coaching within this group of 31 students with disabilities, 74% of those students met the fall to winter growth target. This data supports the connection between enhanced teacher capacity and improved student learning outcomes. It shines a light on the importance of coaching as a professional learning tool and its impact on student outcomes. Students reap the benefits of their teachers' focused efforts to grow their proficiencies related to mathematics instruction and SEL competencies with the support of ongoing instructional coaching. Regardless of the teacher proficiency target, their students grew in their knowledge and performance outcomes. One last little tidbit of data, let's take a look at student perceptions of themselves as math learners. Students also demonstrated an increased awareness of their social emotional competencies during math instruction. Our focus on SEL is one that is embedded within academic instruction. With the support of their instructional coaches, implementing teachers were able to integrate the targeted SEL practices into daily mathematics instruction. This intentionality reinforces skills such as perseverance in times of academic struggle, identity and agency as math learners, and the resourcefulness to access and use the tools and supports necessary for learner success. It's time now to take a look at the processes that lead and that have led to these outcomes. Cliff is going to guide us through the coaching process used in our implementation of Maryland SPDIG.
Yeah, thank you, Alicia. So Alicia has led us up to where we've been, where we're going, what our goals are, and the amazing progress that we have made. And now, what you all probably are very much waiting for is our process. So our coaching process itself is utilized through a very structured process that really is about growing foundational understanding with evidence-based practices. These practices are outlined in our Maryland practice profiles that we've developed and to cultivate effective instructional practice. So district coaches, with the support of our SPDIG coach facilitators, which in our case would be myself and Brittany Sammons, who was mentioned earlier as well, work collaboratively with educators to create the conditions for deep reflection, learning, and desirable changes in practice that support teacher growth and autonomy, which in turn lead to growth in terms of student academic achievement. So where I want to start off with our process is noting that it is all about not just the process itself, the science of coaching. There's very much about the art of coaching. You've got the process, which is the details, and the art, which is the people. And the people lie in these foundational principles that we really stand on with regard to transformational change. So the principles that guide us are trust, which really states at the very core, without trust, there is no coaching. We all know that if you don't trust an individual, you're not going to divulge where you have challenges or where you would like to go. So when we trust, we establish that crucial relationship in order to move forward and have meaningful reflection. The next one that you see on the screen is lenses. And what that is really thinking through inquiry, critical thinking, and the perception or perspectives for decision making. We all come with our own level of inquiry and critical thinking and our own perspective on decision making. And it's crucial that we recognize that within ourselves as coaches, which is what we tell our coaches, but we also want our teachers to recognize that within themselves. The next one is listening. And we hear a lot in education about listening and active listening. And there is a very crucial part of that within our coaching process, because it is about being intentional about listening, because change does occur when we each have a chance to speak and each have a chance to feel heard, know that we are heard, and we listen well to the feedback that we receive. So it's reciprocal, both between coach and educator as well. Then questioning, which we feel like is where we spend a lot of our work, because we are not just being directive in the way that we are telling teachers how they need to change their practice or try new things with regard to evidence-based practices. We're very specific when it comes to inquiry to clarify and uncover their thinking so that we can make the necessary changes within their practice. Stances are all about using what you know about the teacher and their experiences, because ultimately that is also what guides and changes and shifts their instruction. We often say that we want to make sure that students get new varied perspectives, and then as adults we kind of get stuck in what we know. So part of this coaching practice is making sure that we evaluate that with teachers and for the coaches to evaluate it within themselves. So that they're not stuck trying to guide all of their coaches in one methodology that they feel like works. And the last one, and the most important, is it is about learning and that growth. We want to make sure that we're unpacking and supporting ongoing implementation with fidelity. So just as we do with our students, our coaches scaffold the learning of our implementing teachers using facilitative coaching activities such as visualization, role play, video recording, and modeling. And I'll get into some of those practices as I move forward.
Cliff, can I ask you just a curiosity question?
Yes.
Do you use these symbols with your coaches to as like a, I don't know, I don't know if mnemonic device, but a device to connect them with something concrete about these relationship building skills?
Yes, we do.
Interesting. Okay, that's cool. So for some of those who, as a group, went kind of deep into coaching in a community of practice a few years back, um, there was a lot of talk once upon a time. It was called soft skills. I think probably people have moved away from that a little bit, but these building relationship skills. And I like that you have made it more concrete by breaking it down into some specific areas with an image of it. So I just wanted to point that out because it's always been kind of like, well, soft skills, and but this is
Yeah.
you've concretized it a bit, I think.
Yeah, and there's not a hyper focus on it, I will say
Mhm.
that, but these are at our core. And as Alicia said, even like with the social emotional learning piece, even though our emphasis is mathematics, it's integrated. So we want to make sure that the art of coaching is integrated with the science of coaching in our process. So we don't ever, as we are working with our coaches and coaches are working with teachers, there is no, this is our people side, now let's talk
Yeah,
about process side. They go
right.
hand in hand.
I think that makes sense. And I was
Yeah.
just reviewing some of the research on buy-in, so engagement, and one of the critical areas that came out of the research was that if teachers feel listened to, which is very related to trust as well, they're much more likely to develop engagement with what you are doing. It might not start that way. It's not that, the old idea that you have to have 80% buy-in before you can start something. This is more the idea that you may not have it right from the get-go, but you can build it by doing the things that you've listed here. So
Yes.
add that. Thanks, Cliff.
Exactly. Thank you. So this perfectly goes into the next section, which is all about our partnerships. Oftentimes we have processes and procedures, and we talk about what does it look like in terms of expectations. And it's not like we want to go, these are the expectations, boom, 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 boom. But we have to make sure that people are very clear on where their position stands and what it looks like, because as mentioned in the comments in the chat earlier, a lot of people don't understand what true coaching is. A lot of what people call coaching is mentorship and it's informal, and people assume that that's what they're going to get into when they meet with our coaches, and that's just not the case. So on the slide that you're looking at right now is really the expectations and ultimately the outcomes of those expectations in the coaching process. So not only are we outlining the expectations, but we're telling people the why behind us having these expectations. And ultimately, it's about building that collective community around coaching. So we want to make sure that people realize that our coaches are implementing a specific framework and they're making sure that they're doing it with fidelity. This is not coming to the table and saying, how are you feeling today? Let's talk through that. No, we're pinpointing evidence-based practices and we're going through that way. We want people to know that we're providing feedback aligned to a criteria to those evidence-based practices. So it's not just an opinion of coaches that we're in. We are consistently documenting as coaches the coaching cycles, and we're strategically differentiating teacher support. And we'll get more into that as we progress as well. Just like we have these expectations and outcomes for educators, we also have them for the coaches. We also have them for the teachers. We want them to know where their part plays into coaching in and of itself. We always tell teachers that this is not an additional thing or one more thing for them to do. We really solidify with them that the coaches are taking on the majority of the work with regards to documentation and things like that. But we want them to realize that their part is making sure that they are going through their plans with their coaches. They're following through with the things that a coach asks them to implement. Constantly reflect. It's not just about doing what the coach says, but we want you to continue to reflect because ultimately we would love teachers to get on a track to where they're growing the coach out of a job per se, because they've reached a point to where they're like, okay, this is how we analyze things, and we'll always be collaborative, but that's where we're at. And then we want them to advocate for their needs and exercise agency, which really speaks to that trust piece and that autonomy piece, because we want teachers to say, I'm having challenges with this. Can I get help with this? Without them necessarily feeling like it's evaluatory in nature. And we make it very clear that our coaches are not evaluators, and the information that we provide to them is very solidified in confidentiality. So our coaches do not share what the plans that they are working on with their teachers, with their administrators, specifically by teachers. But if a teacher or if an administrator were to come to them, they would say, hey, we're working on a theme. I'm seeing a pattern amongst teachers. And this might be an area that we really need to focus on as a school. And then lastly, in terms of our expectations and our partnerships, we have expectations of the principals. So we reiterate to them, it's crucial as a principal or an administrator that we preserve that confidentiality. We want to make sure that coaches don't feel pressured to report to them of specific teachers, or they're not tying evaluation criteria to what's happening with coaching, in order to cultivate, as we say in our second bullet, a safe teaching and learning environment for teachers to take risks. We always tell teachers, you can share whatever you would like to with your administrator, but this is ultimately about your growth and making sure that you feel comfortable and you trust your coach enough to continue to grow. And then we prioritize those outcomes that we have for school improvement plans in conjunction with what's happening with our work with the State Personnel Development Grant, and our coaching process along with our stakeholders. So part of our coaching process, we show teachers where their progress and their growth correlate and coincide with school improvement. So it's not like all these things are different factors. And so we make sure that the principals know how these things connect, to ultimately what their ultimate goal is as a school leader in growing the school and the district. Once we review those expectations and outcomes, we discuss mutual agreements. And what those mutual agreements are ones that you would see anywhere else, but we review this with our teachers up front before we start the coaching process. So we let them know that we're going through an initial coaching process and coaching sessions that will be scheduled in advance. We have our coach send out calendar invites, and we let teachers know that this is going to be a structured approach that we go through all the time. We are not going to be emailing inconsistently and trying to find times to meet with teachers, and we're always scattered and things are disjointed and it's hard to follow up. Because ultimately, if we're looking at working on an evidence-based practice and a coach comes to observe and they can't get to somebody for 3 weeks later, we already know they've moved on and it's hard to continue with that practice. And we're going to speak to that as well. Initial planning includes collaboratively drafting a work plan to clarify and self-assess the district's self-selected evidence-based practices. And so teachers know that we are going in the realm of them choosing an evidence-based practice, and it is based on teacher choice. The school district has chosen evidence-based practices that they would like their coaches and their teachers to work on holistically. But when it's time for us to work through coaching cycles and the process, teachers are able to choose them at their will, in order to make sure that that teacher autonomy and growth is really on their terms. And then once they select those evidence-based practices, we let them know that it is all about not just the coach working through what implementation looks like, but the coach is going to observe what that implementation looks like. They can do that twofold based on scribing, which everybody is typically used to, someone coming in and just writing down what's happening in the classroom and then comparing what happened in that observation to the criteria that we consider to be proficient for the evidence-based practice. But we also have an opportunity for teachers to be recorded as well. And then we can go through our recordings as well to note proficiency and and how that goes. I'll touch on that in more detail in a couple slides as well. The emphasis is making sure that our coaching conversations really capitalize on identifying the strengths and opportunities to grow proficiency of implementation. The coaching conversations, again, are confidential. The coaching document designates data points and required by the external SPDIG evaluating team. And once an evidence-based practice is determined proficient, the work plan tells them what happens in the next steps. Are we going to move on to the next evidence-based practice, or do we need to go through another cycle or 2 or 3 based on continued evaluation in order to make sure that we're gaining proficiency before we're moving on? That happens through the professional learning provided by the coach once the evidence-based practice is selected. And they work with the teacher in co-planning and going through a variety of learning activities in order to grow that teacher's implementation with the evidence-based practice. As they reach the end of the coaching cycle, the coach does ask for input on what is working with coaching. We don't want to just continue to go through a process and not gather teacher feedback as well. We want to know how I approach things as a coach. Did that work for you as an educator, and how can we fine tune our coaching process? So these are all things that we discuss at the mutual agreement phase at the very beginning. So our first question with regard to coaching and the coaching process that we want to turn over to you guys is, how can an early emphasis on interpersonal skills address barriers in the coaching progression? Again, centering things around that art of coaching versus that process or science of coaching.
I do think that we're gaining on a science when it comes to developing relationships, is my take on it. And as people are thinking about this, there was a group of researchers and other types of practitioners that got together to talk about technical assistance and what the evidence was for key features of strong technical assistance. And really, like, you have a hard time separating coaching from TA the way that they were talking about it and mentoring. But some of the things you talked about came up in that. So I do think that, we're starting to have some triangulation of what works.
I'm seeing in the chat people talk about connections for trust. Trust. It seems like everybody's kind of going back to trust being the number one, and it's super essential to making sure that we build that trust. All right. So, holistically, when it comes to our coaching process, there are 3 components that we emphasize with all those that we are working with and explaining our coaching process. We have our practice profiles, which is where we have our evidence-based practices and our criteria for proficiency. What is it that we're working on based on what we know is evidence-based and what works? And then we go into developing that work plan where the teacher is selecting the evidence-based practices that they want to work on with their coach for their first coaching cycle and the remaining coaching cycles for the year. And then we get down to the coaching cycles themselves, which again are going to be based on the learning activities, what is observed, working on things with their coaches, and whether or not they meet those proficiencies at the end of a coaching cycle, or if we have to continue through coaching cycles. And then, of course, as they reach proficiency at the end of the first, second, third, however many coaching cycles, then we're right back to the practice profiles, looking at what evidence-based practice we work on next. And then it just continues in terms of the coaching process. So coaching cycles are cyclical, and so is the coaching process. We're constantly reevaluating how things are going. So they review and discuss SDI, math, and SEL evidence-based practices using our practice profiles. They develop a work plan which lists the EVPs. They engage in coaching cycles to develop proficiency and implementation. They continue the coaching cycles until proficiency once again, and then they return to the work plan document to document proficiency and determine the next EVP to implement.
And Cliff, do you have, are any of these available online for folks to look at or have access to?
Yes, we have them on our websites. I believe we provided a Signet the practice profiles themselves. And we also have the work plans as well that will be available to people as well,
Okay.
in addition to our coaching cycle form.
Also, I'll put the link to our coaches guide, which we just finished up with
Yeah.
all the accessibility review, and it's available public facing on our web page. So I'll put that in the chat.
Great.
All right. So the next thing that we're going to discuss are the goals of the coaching process. So again, we want to make sure that we are collaboratively planning based on the implementation of the evidence-based practice. We are providing feedback, again, based on the implementation, and then we are engaged in learning activities. So this is all, again, based on teacher autonomy. We're putting them in the driver's seat. We're saying, where do you feel like you want to learn? Are we starting with a math practice? Are we starting with an SEL practice and a math practice? That is because you find that there's SEL issues with a particular math practice when you are doing instruction. Does it have to do with specially designed instruction? Do we want to start there in addition to an SEL practice or SDI as it relates to specific math? So there's a balance, and we talk through that with the teacher, and then we go into our coaching cycles. So our SDI practice profile is the first one that I mentioned before, or is one of the practice profiles that I mentioned. It's the adaptation of content, method, or delivery of instruction to address the unique learning needs that result from a disability and to enable a learner to access and make progress towards grade level standards. So SDI should accelerate progress to narrow the achievement gap. Math SDI includes evidence-based instructional practices that have been shown to result in improved performance and learning of academic content through research. So the adaptation of math lessons on the individual characteristics of the learner, which considerations of the cognitive load in the teaching process and cognitive energy required in the learning process is how we reached all of the components of our SDI practice profile. Our second practice profile that we utilize to determine proficiency and outlines evidence-based practices is our core mathematics profile. It's grounded in the understanding that the base of effective core Tier 1 instruction aligned with Maryland College and Career Ready standards for mathematics comes together. So recent research in mathematics instruction and interventions have demonstrated success in raising mathematics achievement levels of students who are struggling and who have disabilities. So that, in conjunction with What Works Clearinghouse, with an expert panel, distilled this contemporary mathematics intervention research into an easily comprehensible and practical recommendations for teachers to use while teaching elementary students in intervention settings. And they have a published What Works Clearinghouse practice guide that we have integrated our profile with that outlines these things. And they are appropriate for students that are at risk or for disabilities or do have disabilities. Our third practice profile is our social emotional learning profile. And they hit on the areas of identity and agency, emotional regulation, cognitive regulation, and social skills. It incorporates, and those are 4 of the 5 tenets of everyday SEL instruction that is designed by Nancy Fry, Dominique Smith, and Douglas Fisher. So again, all of these things are research-based and based on those professionals as we drafted our evidence-based practices and proficiencies for SEL. So now I'll talk about our work plan. So the work plan really serves as our roadmap to teacher success. So completed collaboratively, the work plan establishes the parameters for the working relationship by identifying core values. So what are the core values that are important for the teacher? Because ultimately the core values do impact the delivery of instruction. Then we talk about communication expectations. Are you a teacher that prefers email communications, phone communications, in-person meetings all the time, touch bases? That's also crucial for a coach to know, not just the evidence-based practice that we're working on. Then we talk about this setting the targeted practices themselves, and then identifying the benchmarks and milestones that define success, i.e. our practice profiles. And then together, the teacher and coach review and discuss the alignment between the SPDIG goals and the school improvement plan, like I said before. And then the teachers do a self-assessment of their own based on the practice profiles. And we have an evidence-based practice like review or self-assessment form where they can rate themselves. And it's kind of like an honest assessment going into coaching for the coach to evaluate. And then as they work through their evidence-based practices or their EBPs, we really see based on our criteria, are you getting there? Are you not getting there? And let's work through things. And then that's also where our reflection piece comes in as the work plan as well. So coaches must complete the observations, like I said before, and identify those specific EBP criteria to determine that proficiency. And as I go through the cycles themselves, I'll talk specifics, which is what we're going into right now. So our coaching cycles consist of 4 stages: our planning stage, our implementation stage, our analyze stage, and then our growth stage. And then we keep it going. So each stage does take time to complete, and each teacher may require different amounts of time based on these specific stages of the coaching cycle. So I will start with plan. During the plan phase, we make sure that it is really structured and flows from the very beginning when it comes to a coach's communication with an educator. So in our coaching guide, we give them a sample email template on reaching out to the teacher, explaining what coaching looks like, figuring out the scheduling process, and moving from there. So we want to make sure that teachers understand that from their coaches, they are going to get formal emails from them. They're going to confirm meeting dates with them on a regular basis. They are going to ask you questions about your prior knowledge to gain where they are, where you are, and where they could potentially start or work with you. We stress that coaches are to gather all supporting documents for planning. We have a coach's planning document, for example, that they have to have prepped in advance. And then we know that our coaches, it's not just about meeting with somebody and going through the evidence-based practice, but they really need to unpack what the evidence-based practice really means. We have a big issue within education that all of us, I think, have encountered where everybody views a certain practice or how to get something differently. So we want to make sure that we're on that same page by unpacking those evidence-based practices and making sure they have a clear understanding before they even come to the teacher so that they can level set and explain to them what proficiency and what the evidence-based practice should look like in terms of instruction and implementation. At this point, then they're planning with the teacher, the implementation, and then they're scheduling observations, their coaching cycles, and then check-ins along the way. At this point, we move into the implementation stage, otherwise known as the observe, scribe, or record stage. So this is where we really focus on the actions. What are happening within the classroom? We're capturing the implementation of the evidence-based practice during class instruction. So the coach, again, will either come in and they'll be very intentional about observation of instruction as applies to the targeted practices identified during this stage. So the coach uses the process of scribing to capture all elements of teacher implementation, the language of instruction, the strategies and supports used to address learning differences, the dynamics of class response of the students. All those things are captured when they are observing within a classroom. One thing that we do have that is very different for a lot of people, and even might make some people uneasy, but is the recording of instruction. So we talk to teachers about their comfort level with recording so that we record their instruction, because it's one thing to scribe and to review with the teacher how a lesson went, and for them to really see themselves in practice and the students in practice and what the implementation looked like in order to evaluate proficiency and how we can make changes. So for our process, we use swivel robots and iPads to record video within classrooms. So the swivel moves based on sounds, and teachers will have mics around their necks to capture teacher audio as well. And then we have, through an online system called Debriefscape, the ability to tag different points of proficiency or where you see the evidence-based practice being used. So teachers ultimately, in the end of this implementation stage, when they move into the next stage, they're able to really see where the practices were put into place or where they might have had challenges with those practices. This is also a good balance because we talk about the volume of teachers that a coach could possibly hit and how difficult that might be scheduling wise. So if we can get into a pattern of there are certain teachers that want to be observed physically by their coach and have things scribed, other teachers don't mind being video recorded and going over those analyses with the teacher later. It's just really helpful across the board. Either way, we hope to get the same desired effect in terms of analyzing proficiency, but we have two different ways to do that at the implementation stage. Next is that analyze stage. And so that really involves capturing where you've gone, because we've gone through the learning activities to improve instruction. We've looked at we've gone through the evidence-based practices. We've defined what they look like. And now it's time for the coach to sit down and talk with the teacher about what they saw and the things that actually happened within the classroom in order to figure out how to grow that capacity of that teacher. So together, the coach and the implementing teacher objectively focus on what's been observed and the impact of the teacher's actions on student learning as reflected in formative or summative measures. And then proficiency is determined by reviewing the components of the EBPs in comparison with the evidence that was seen. So that's practice profiles in terms of proficiency, the evidence that was seen in terms of scribing or video evidence that we've collected. So this stage has a far greater purpose than simply identifying proficiency rating, though, because it provides an opportunity to examine instructional practice and distinguish elements of effectiveness and reflect on that impact. Again, reflection. We want constant reflection and not just figuring out a data point and how to move a data point. And this also prompts growth of the teacher and the coach, and most importantly, the growth of the students. So we want to think holistically about growth. This is not, again, how to solve a problem with a student or to solve a problem or an issue with the teacher. How can we grow in all three aspects in terms of a coach, a teacher, and students in terms of progress? And speaking of growth, the analyze stage goes into the growth stage. So during this stage, the coach prepares for the coaching conversation by reviewing the transcription of events, discussing student progress monitoring data, and then determining the learning activities that we need to move forward with in order to improve practice. Or if we figure out that a teacher is proficient, then we might move on to the next evidence-based practice. But it's really about proficiency as determined by reviewing the components of the EBPs in comparison with the evidence that we have seen. So when it comes to growth, now we are at the professional development stage. So a coach might be working in groups with teachers that are working on the same evidence-based practice. And we are talking through systematic ways to implement holistically as a group, even though they're observing individually and touching base with teachers. They might be doing those individual learning activities with teachers in order to grow them. And then they're ultimately examining how they are helping teachers to grow in their practice in order to impact change. So we want to make sure that we're also excuse me, we're also assessing the effective nature of coaching supports for teachers in a myriad of ways in order to serve the social, emotional, and academic needs of the students. So our next question is, what excites you about this coaching process and its impact on student outcomes?
Cliff, I think you're not asking me, but I'm going to respond anyway. But what has excited me most with this evolution of our coaching process is seeing the growth of our teachers, the interest in the data and exploring options to address student needs, and also within the community of the school, grasping on and saying, hey, this actually works. How do I get to be a part of the team? And so that is, I guess, what excites me the most about a coaching process.
I see, and the chat, Jennifer referenced being impressed by the use of technology. So we're in the very beginning stages of that. But the teachers are very excited. We very much emphasized the scribing and the observation and analysis of a coach on an individual level, very much so. So as a part of our process, we also have a detailed document that we really outline what scribing looks like as well, so that we make sure that the coaches are capturing the crucial parts of instruction that we need to analyze and help to move the marker forward with in terms of instructional implementation and utilizing the evidence-based practices. And then I appreciate Penny you saying you love how reflective and intentional it is. And it very much is, from the very beginning all the way to the end. And by end, meaning the end of the growth cycle, and then moving back to the beginning, because this is a continuous process. So Alicia said what she's excited about is how teachers grow and their excitement in the process. So that's kind of what we want to end on. And Laura, I just see your comment. This is exactly what we're getting ready to hit on. Seeing teachers grow in their practice, and when they see their growth and the impact it has on improving student outcomes, it's amazing to see. So these are reflections that came directly from our teachers. At the end of every coaching cycle, our coaches provide to the teachers a coaching survey that I touched on briefly before. I talked about collecting teacher feedback, but I didn't say how we did it. We have a coaching survey at the end of every coaching cycle where they really evaluate all those touch points that we talked about before in terms of our principles, in addition to the process itself. And it's anonymous, so we hope that it elicits them to be truthful about how they feel like coaches are doing. And these are reflections based on our final end of year survey that we sent, and we asked them to reflect holistically on how coaching went. So this one teacher said, this was a very supportive process that really helped me to become a better math teacher without adding to my plate. My coach was always willing to help in any way, and she could without causing more stress or work for me. That was the general educator that stated that. We do ask them to identify if they're special ed or general education, just so we can kind of at least suss that part out. And then the next teacher, who was a special educator, said the coaching process was helpful, and I appreciate the support throughout. And she said, I also want to acknowledge how effective my general education teacher was. She was consistently using data to guide instruction, which really helped our students to make progress. It was great to have a strong collaboration between coaching support and classroom instruction. And that's something that's really resonated throughout the course of us implementing such a structured coaching process. There are some teachers that come in and they're like, this seems like this is going to be a lot. I don't know how we're going to get through this. It seems like one more thing. I'm feeling the pressure. And then when they realize that we're firming up what collaboration looks like, we're helping them to understand and establish what analyzing data looks like. We're helping them to understand exactly what implementation looks like, beyond just what is provided in their curriculum or the directions within their specific curriculum. Because oftentimes we found that teachers confuse curriculum fidelity with understanding evidence-based practices and how to grow them aside from what a curriculum might state. And so it's something that we've realized and we've seen in reflections and surveys results and feedback. Teachers start to gain that understanding, which is exactly what we want. So this slide shows our SPDIG leadership team, which is Alicia, myself, Carol Clerk, again, our SPDIG co-principal investigator, from Maryland Coalition of Inclusive Education, Brittany Salmons, who is also a SPDIG learning specialist, like myself, or SPDIG coach facilitator, and she's also with the Maryland Coalition for Maryland Coalition of Inclusive Education. And then Amy Gomer Erickson, who is our SPDIG external evaluator through University of Kansas. So this is all of our contact information. You guys can reach out to us at any given point if you have any questions. Well, I know we spoke holistically about the things that we've done and outlined in a summary fashion, a lot with regard to our process, but it is very specific in terms of how we got there. Alicia put in the chat our coaching guide, which really speaks to how specific we are with our process. And you'll see that if you review it. So at any given juncture, we're willing to answer any questions about our process. And we just wanted to share how great it is to be able to provide this level of support to teachers and educators, coaches, principals, and ultimately our students, who are the ones gaining, which is what we want.
So Cliff and Alicia, thank you so much. And I wanted to make a couple of points about what you shared today. As we're thinking about dissemination, and you presented information to projects that are doing similar work and want to have a coaching system, right? Or have a coaching system already if they've been implementing their project for a while. And so they can either kind of think, hey, we can follow this, the larger system idea, or we can pull out this idea, this strategy using a practice profile or the coaching cycle, the work plan. So I think as a presentation to this group, this was perfect. I would love for folks who participated to think about one idea or one resource that they're going to use going forward and to put that into the chat. The other point I wanted to make is you had all the elements in here for a really good dissemination plan, or to be part of a really good dissemination plan, right? So you shared your impact. You had those graphs sharing your impact. You had some good social validity data of the perspective of the folks who were involved, which could help you with recruitment if you're thinking about dissemination for the purpose of recruiting other schools, districts, scaling up in districts and beyond. The impact that you shared with the graphs could certainly be shared with your state legislature, with the state the school district superintendents, with the principals association, etc. So I just wanted to pull out that you can use something like this presentation and pull pieces out and use it for your dissemination. So it's got multiple uses. And so as I was saying that, people were talking about what they're going to look into. So framing coaching as not adding to the teacher's plate. That is actually, it's definitely something they're looking for, teachers. Checking out Debriefscape, great. Coaching guide. Take a look at Debriefscape, good. Lisa Deeker is going to be so happy to hear this, by the way. She has put her heart and soul along with her team into that. Good. Yeah, these resources are fabulous. Alicia, Cliff, Brittany, and Carol, if she listens to this recording. Well, thank you so much, everyone. This has been wonderful. And John, thank you for putting us together. I realized the thing that I didn't do, Alicia and Cliff, is give you all a fun way to introduce yourselves today. I must be rusty after the summer. So, you know, sorry about that. They should get to know you. Hopefully, folks will get to know you a little bit more at the SPDIG national meeting. And we'll be thinking about those more informal ways to introduce ourselves to come into a room. But it was great having you all here today, and we will see you at next month's director's webinar, if not before.